Welcome to day 3 of the Future Law Virtual Summit, Negotiating the New Normal. The session you're in now is called Towards Data Dignity, Diversity by Design. We'll get into that in a moment, but I'm sitting here with Dyann Heward. Yeah, I did say it correctly.
You did.
Dyann Heward Mills, CEO of Heward Mills and ethics advisor to the European Union. We'll be talking about how she founded a global data privacy consultancy, and we'll be talking about how she brings her own experience into the boardroom, sometimes referring to her work as being the conscience of the boardroom. We'll start off the conversation. We'll have a conversation about 30 minutes, and then we'll have an open Q&A. And if I have any other questions remaining, that's how we'll fill that time. But if you're with us now in the Zoom room, and if you can get in quickly, if you're watching from the stream, please join us here. If you're here in the Zoom room, you can put your questions in the chat. So Dyann, without further ado, we're going to cover seemingly distinct subjects: data and privacy, and also diversity. And we're going to see how those two things come together quite nicely in your vision. But before we do that, I'd love to get to know you a little better. What do you eat for breakfast? What are your hobbies? What do you binge watch on Netflix? or anything else you want to share with us? What do you want to share with us? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I had a bowl of watermelon for breakfast. Happens to be my favorite fruit. It's just so clean, crisp, refreshing. So all of that resonates with me. In terms of hobbies, I like walking with the dog, especially on sort of autumnal days, and meeting up with friends. I do a bit of yoga. So yeah, varied.
Do you want to tell us what you've been binge watch? Because I know you have Netflix.
So, do you know, I don't typically watch television or Netflix, but if I'm ever sort of recommended something, then I will take some time out. And there are a couple of documentaries that I've sort of watched lately. There's The Social Contract. That was obviously one that's very relevant to what I do. So yes, I watched that with my 14-year-old daughter, actually, and we had a very interesting conversation after that, just around, you know, her practice and that of her peers and friends as well. And how actually embracing they are of technology, which I think is important to sort of remind ourselves of. So yes.
So what's your story? Where did you grow up? How did you get to where we are now? And kind of like a quick flow through that, but take us through some key points.
Sure. So my parents are from Ghana. And I happened to be born in this country, in the UK, but went to Ghana when I was very young, when I was under 2, and spent my formative years there. And I think that left a lasting impression on me, actually, to sort of grow up in a sort of developing country, but also a country where I felt, you know, completely at ease. My mum was a lawyer, my dad was a dentist, so surrounded by sort of Black professionals. And then came to the UK when I was around 12. And that was a big culture shock, actually. So arriving and schooling here, and, you know, being surrounded by a sea of white faces, and having to adjust to, like, people looking differently to me, having different hair to me, and having to assimilate, actually, just very quickly. So I schooled here in the UK, qualified myself here, and I decided to go down the barrister route because I kind of wanted to have that sort of autonomy and that independence. I like public speaking, and so it seemed to suit really my personality. And so I qualified as a barrister, I also had children at that time, and rather than sort of fall out of the law, I decided to specialize in computer and communications law, because I felt it was really very cutting edge, and I thought if I could specialize in that area, I'd be able to sort of set myself up independently as a consultant, which is what I did, and provide sort of advice in the area of IT, security, and privacy. So yes, so I did that, and I was sort of pretty self-sufficient. And then I guess a momentous time for me was in trying to sort of juggle that kind of like family life, being a professional, and had sort of tragic circumstances as well. A very close cousin to me passed away suddenly. She had 3 children, and I decided to take them on. So I, at that time, was sort of, had 5 children and then fell pregnant. So I was then juggling a career and 6 kids. And at that point, it went in-house because that provided a degree of security for me. And I was a sort of first in-house position was with Linklaters, the global law firm, where I acted as a global privacy counsel, really. And that was where I really got to understand privacy programs and how they are operationalized. So I worked in the risk and compliance team, and obviously had sort of technical experts globally to work alongside. And so, yes, I did an in-house role there, went to GE Capital as a global privacy counsel, again, working in-house with various teams, IT, compliance, HR, and helping sort of build, implement robust data protection programs.
Great.
So yes,
Yeah.
a number of in-house roles.
Yeah, and that all before you started Heward Mills, and we'll get to Heward Mills in a moment. But we're getting a sense of who you are as a person, running a global company and having 6 kids at the same time. A mighty woman indeed. Before we get into that, you said in the preparation that the Black Lives Matter moment, not the recent moment this year of the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many others, but I think 5-6 years ago, Ferguson. I think you're referring to that. Tell us about how that affected you.
So sorry, the death I referred to was the death of a close family member of mine. But I think, in terms of the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement, it was this sudden sort of realization of all the repressed trauma that individuals such as myself had sort of experienced, where you are faced with micro, macro aggressions, and you're not really able to articulate them because you don't want to be seen to sort of create a fuss or to make people feel uncomfortable, and suddenly there was this sort of outpouring of that, and a release, and an understanding of just how gaslit we have been, and how there are these very, very sort of systemic issues that require a huge amount of work to shift, and feeling a sadness about that, a sort of a grief around that, but also being just very, very determined to make a change. I guess in a way, I went through a similar process personally when I lost my cousin. It was incredibly sad, heart-wrenching situation. But my response to that is, how can we make this better? How can we survive this? How can we turn this into something that's, really, really positive? A rebirth of something rather than just the end. And that's very much how I see what it's about. What happens next? is very much how I see the Black Lives Matter movement. What are we going to do next?
So the title of our chat today is Towards Data Dignity, and I just wanted to zero in on that one word, the last word in that, dignity. And let's leave data out of it for a moment. But what does dignity mean to you?
So it's interesting, you know, in terms of my choice of career, I always wanted to be a human rights lawyer. And I remember one of my lecturers saying to me, well, Dyann, you don't want to be stuck in a dusty room just poring over sort of human rights statutes. You want to make this kind of relevant. And that's why I went into the area of data protection, because it was both about sort of protecting fundamental human rights and also in a very, very applicable way. And I really believe in this concept of, you know, individuals having that sort of choice and freedom over what is done with their information, and information that's very personal to them, and having that treated with the sort of the respect that it warrants, because it really does go to the core of who you are as an individual. And I think, you know, I have that sort of passion for opening eyes to this concept of data dignity, of information having this kind of, you know, power, and organizations understanding the impact on an individual when their information is misused. And a need to really honor that and put individuals at the heart of their decision making.
Right.
So that to me what data dignity means.
Yeah, and it's not the case, right? That organizations are putting this at the heart of what they do. I've heard you say privacy is in crisis. What do you mean by that?
So I think that some organizations are trying at least to do that. I think we do need to give sort of credit where credit is due, but there is definitely a lot more that must be done. So I think, you know, in terms of the sort of the paradox, we were sleepwalking into this world where there was this huge absorption of data, and there was this idea that in order to innovate and to be competitive, what organizations needed was kind of more data, to be able to use data freely without any accountability, to carry out sort of surreptitious practices over data in order to influence people and their choices, even the way they vote. And so I think in the last few years, there's been, and it was Cambridge Analytica was the that moment, that seismic moment, where that's being questioned now, actually. And so we are at this sort of inflection point, right? Is it possible to continue to innovate, to grow, to develop in a way that doesn't compromise the data dignity and fundamental rights of individuals? And actually, there are organizations who recognize the importance of building trust of individuals, and recognize that actually, if they do want to develop and innovate and to be competitive, well, they've got to take their customers with them. They've got to take their employees with them. They've got to take their stakeholders with them. And so it isn't this, you know, zero-sum game. Actually, it's hard to, you know, ensure that you are, as I mentioned, you know, putting individuals at the heart of what you do. It takes investment. It takes engaging the right sort of technical skill set. It takes communicating well across a business. It takes time and it takes effort. But I think we're starting to see that the rewards of that far outweigh the cost.
Well, and we'll get to that, the opportunity that you started to sketch for organizations, and especially organizations in this times where Cambridge Analytica as a kind of an inflection moment, and the opportunities that you see. But let's talk about Heward Mills first a little bit, because I know it's a really special company. I'd love to hear why you founded it, and tell us a little bit about who works for you, and what makes that so special.
Sure. I mean, I think Heward Mills is probably the thing I'm most proud of, after my children, of course. And you know, the sort of the genesis of Heward Mills, I guess, you know, at the time of founding the company, I was working as a partner in the London office of Baker McKenzie, which is a, you know, huge opportunity, huge platform for me. And was in that role, sort of heading up the privacy and cybersecurity practice. A number of clients inquired about the data protection officer position, crystallized under the GDPR. And
you're going to have to, for people who are not familiar with those kind of stuff, data protection officer and GDPR, you're going to have to give us a sense of what you're talking about.
Sure, I'll explain. So under the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the European-based legislation that took effect in May of 2018, there's a requirement for certain organizations to appoint a data protection officer. And the data protection officer is an independent person or firm that primarily has the responsibility of ensuring that the organization is compliant with the General Data Protection Regulation, with the GDPR. And the concept is that you have effectively an independent individual or firm who acts as a critical friend, and will be the sort of interface between the organization and its customers or its employees and the various supervisory authorities across Europe on issues of data protection and privacy. Right. Why is this so important? And it goes to this idea of this conscience of the boardroom, where you have someone who is independent overseeing your practice. Of course, you become more accountable. You inevitably do. You behave differently where you have this role in place. And so there's certain organizations that have a mandatory obligation to appoint a data protection officer, and other organizations that appoint a data protection officer because they see it as being good for business. They want to do the right thing, and they see it as being good practice to have a DPO in place. So as a private practice practitioner working in a law firm, offering advice to a number of organizations on this point, I recognized that actually there was a real shortage of qualified data protection officers, or DPOs, that could actually perform the role. And I was in a very unique position, having worked in-house, as I explained, you know, actually being an internal practitioner, having to resolve issues of data protection and privacy in the trenches, as it were. And then also to have been in a position where I was advising as a partner at a law firm on these issues. And it was that combination of both sort of private practice and in-house practice that put me in a unique position to set up Heward Mills. Mm.
Tell us about Heward Mills. Tell us, because we've heard a lot about the privacy side of it, but I want to now zero in on the diversity. Diversity by design is the second half of the title of this conversation. What's special about Heward Mills in that regard, and how you, from there, approach organizations you work with?
Sure. And I guess, you know, it was helpful to understand a bit of my kind of history, because all of that, I guess, came into play in setting up the company. As I mentioned, there had been sort of occasions where I experienced, either directly or through shared experiences with people close to me, this pushing against and feeling that there were structures in place that just didn't allow me to flourish to my full potential, without really understanding what these were, or being in a position to articulate them until the Black Lives Matter movement. But obviously, subconsciously, in having an opportunity to set up Heward Mills, mindfully wanted to employ individuals that society, as I experienced it, pushes against. So ethnic minorities, women, individuals that had mental health challenges, you know, individuals that were not going to be given, that had all the talent, but just weren't given the opportunities. And those who had the same vision as me. So even, you know, individuals who had the opportunity, but recognized that they were in a position of privilege.
Mm.
And so that really, by design, is the organization that I've created. And I really felt strongly that our diversity would allow us to actually grow and perform incredibly competitively also in the market. And it was quite a bold thing to have a sort of a Black owned professional services global business, right? And perhaps if I thought about it for too long, I may never have done it. But I thought, well, why not? Why not just try and see if we can actually make this work?
So you're basically proving what many of us have heard, and many of us have heard organizations pay lip service to. Diversity really increases opportunity, and some even say increases the bottom line. But you're actually proving it with Heward Mills. You're in what, 70 different jurisdictions, employing a diverse group of people from all over the world. How does that work?
Yeah, so we, for our clients, we're registered as their data protection officer in over 70 jurisdictions. So
Wow.
We have clients from different sectors, from financial services, health, fast-growing tech businesses, as part of the service that we offer, we register as the data protection officer when engaged by a client. We also have offices across 6 jurisdictions that we're expanding very quickly. So we've got offices in London, in Dublin, in Accra, in Germany, in San Francisco, and in Switzerland also. And again, you know, my thinking in setting up the business was that we were going to be global, because actually that's the most effective way to support clients. And perhaps the experience that I had working in-house and also for a global law firm helped me to really understand all of that. And also, just in terms of the caliber of individuals that we have in the team, I was very determined that we were going to be multidisciplinary, because I think actually having that sort of skill set in the team, again, helps us in the role. When you are advising a client on issues of data, yes, understanding the law is very important, but there are also other technical areas around security, for example, and having individuals with a background in security is super helpful. Having individuals who've had some experience at regulators also super helpful. And I didn't want us to just have, you know, one type of person. I wanted individuals that had very rich experiences and backgrounds, because again, I think that sort of diversity really helps when we're triaging issues. We're bringing different perspectives to the table, and it's that richness of perspective, I think, that is incredibly valuable to clients, and perhaps clients who don't have that level of diversity in the boardroom, right? So
yeah, so you said earlier on, when you came to the UK, you saw all white faces. I wonder what the boardroom looks like, and I'd love you to tie that into this notion of being the conscience of the boardroom, as you said earlier. What does that look like, and how do you as a Black woman in a white boardroom, let's put it out there, succeed in being the conscience of the boardroom?
yeah, so by luck, by design, I've decided to set up this data protection office firm, and actually there's a sort of a statutory protection that we have, in that, you know, we are independent. We're not employees within organizations. We have got that degree of I guess, autonomy, which is so important, actually. And I feel, just in terms of who I am as an individual, I always want to be able to be authentic and to be able to be transparent. You know, I really believe in that, and to be able to communicate freely with the individuals actually I work with and for. I think that's so important in establishing your integrity. And so, you know, as that in the boardroom, I'm able to communicate difficult messages to clients, and also constructive messages too. But, you know, I can say, look, we need to do better on this, because our employees require us to, our customers expect it of us. And if, you know, we're stating this in our privacy notices to the world, that this is the type of organization that we are, then we have to live by that, and really not have a sort of a discrepancy between, you know, what we say we do and what we actually do.
Yeah. So, because I could be quite skeptical, right? I don't know how often the DPO is in the boardroom, but I wonder what happens the moment you leave. Are they really taking this seriously, this issue of privacy and data, but also the issue of, I guess, diversity and how that shapes privacy decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, are they just saying, thank you, Dyann, and we'll get right on it, and nothing happens? I'm a little bit of a skeptic, I'm sorry.
And you know, rightly so. But I think the important thing of certainly the data protection officer role is it's ongoing. So, you know, if you have a mandatory obligation to appoint one, actually, you really have to respect the views of the data protection officer, and often we have to sign off on decisions where individuals' rights and freedoms could be impacted. Ultimately, if we felt that an organization was acting in breach of its obligations, we would have to raise, you know, concerns about that. So it's a two-way and ongoing relationship, which is, you know, you have to work on building that trust. And I guess we are very fortunate, because the types of organizations that come to us actually want to do the right thing. You know, if they didn't want to do the right thing, they wouldn't be coming to a robust data protection office. My worry is for those organizations actually that don't have data protection officers, or don't respect the views of their data protection officer. You know, ultimately, what would that lead to? And what would the impact of that be on individuals? Because it really does, you know, ultimately that's where it ends. It's on the individual.
There's two ways of looking at this. Basically, on the one hand, they have to have a data protection officer. That's European rules, I think. At least in Europe, you need one.
Yes.
Maybe in other countries as well.
In other regions too.
In other regions as well. But that's from the perspective of it's mandatory. What's the other perspective? I know you're framing it as an opportunity. What is the real opportunity here, and what are some of the organizations that are not really paying attention to that missing out on?
So I think the opportunity is, as we sort of discussed, having a diverse perspective when it comes to important decisions around data, which really are going to determine, you know, the future of organizations. And also, I guess, you know, ultimately being able to build and to innovate, because, you know, we also have very constructive advice to organizations about how you can meet compliance and use this trust that you're building to actually drive your business forward.
So Apple very recently launched an ad campaign. Is that along the same lines?
Absolutely. That's a very, very good example of an organization that has decided, actually, we are going to take a lead here. You know, we are actually going to demonstrate how privacy can act as a competitive advantage. And we want to be seen as the tech company that is invested in privacy. And there are many, many others following the lead. So, you know, there may be a legal requirement in a particular jurisdiction. So Microsoft, similar approach on the California Privacy Act, Consumers Privacy Act. Those rights were were designed for individuals in California, but Microsoft said, actually, we're going to apply these rights across the US. So taking an approach of, we're not going to go for just the minimum standards. We recognize how important this is. And I think that's ultimately the direction of travel. So those organizations that grasp that, understand that, and want to set standards are going to be the sort of the progressive organizations that are going to move with the times. Because I think trust is going to be so critical right here. And trust is not something that you can just pay lip service to. Actually, you are either a good, trusted organization striving to do the right things, invested in this, and over time, and you can demonstrate that, or you're not. So you know, which camp?
So there goes the skeptic again.
Okay.
You named two big tech companies. I think they're number 1 and number 4 in the world as with regards to how big they are, bigger than most of our nation state economies. Out of Silicon Valley, they'd typically say, you know, let us self-regulate it. We're doing the right thing. Look at us. Look at our these great examples you're giving as well. What does that mean for regulation? We're here at the Future Law Virtual Summit. What is your take on regulation versus self-regulating sectors, and what are the opportunities, do you think, really? Let's go there right away. What are the opportunities that lie in regulation? And I know we have audiences from all over the world. I was just talking to people about privacy in Trinidad, privacy in Nigeria, privacy in the Philippines, just last night in Pakistan. What are the opportunities that you see for legal and policy work?
And I just want to say I have no affiliation with the two companies that we mentioned. I think they're just good examples of how privacy can be done well. And I think you've got to give, you know, credit where credit is due. And I know that there are many examples of other organizations doing incredibly innovative, engaging activities around data protection and privacy, and that's to be commended. In terms of self-regulation, we have to be very, very careful there, because what you want to do is to encourage standards, and to encourage standards globally. And I think it's very, very important to understand that, you know, legislation plays a role. We've got to hold governments accountable, as well as organizations. And so there has to be, because this is a fundamental human right, there has to be a baseline of legislation that protects. And I think that that baseline of legislation needs to protect globally. And it is very, very encouraging to see actually other regions also adopting data protection and privacy standards, recognizing that it's important in order to actually encourage investment, inward investment, and also to stimulate growth and innovation. So, you know, really, I think the case has been made for higher standards, but being ever vigilant on it.
Right.
You know, the GDPR was great in terms of putting the topic on the agenda, on the sort of table for boards to discuss, but actually, how effective is it being enforced? How
Right.
accountable are organizations truly? I think, you know, the legislation is a starting point, but
Right.
actually there's a lot more that can be done and should
So
be done.
in all our jurisdictions, we can push for legislation that is similar to GDPR, similar to the European Union legislation around privacy and data, or similar to the California legislation. These are kind of like the things we should the examples that we should strive for in all our different countries. But what is your big vision? What is like how do we, I don't know, fix this in a big way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, look, the GDPR is the European approach. And I think there's lots that, you know, is very positive about that. It's not a perfect framework in any way. And I think it's important that we understand that there will be different sort of cultural nuances, and everyone has to adapt legislation that's fit for purpose for their own culture. And I do think that there needs to be sort of discussion and coordination at a supranational level, because what you don't want is pockets of low protection, because inevitably it will be the most vulnerable in society that will be exploited, you know. And going forward, we have to do things differently. You know, this is what this discussion is all about. We don't really want a repeat of what has happened in the past. So,
Right.
so my vision is for us to have these sorts of discussions, to raise issues where we feel actually that there are risks here, and risks for very vulnerable individuals, and around technology, whether it's, you know, artificial intelligence, it's biometrics, it's use of facial recognition, you know, all these issues. How are we ensuring that there isn't bias built into the code, and who's actually at the table when important decisions are being made? Do we have that diverse viewpoint?
We have a lot of work to do ahead of us. What are your final words around? We filled up the time actually quite nicely.
Oh, wow.
What are your hopes, or what is your invitation to the people at this summit, and what do you want to engage with them on? As we can do that, by the way, for everybody at home, we can do that as early as this afternoon at 4:30. There's where we'll do the collaborative journey, and this will be one of the big subjects we'll be talking about in the collaborative journey, where you'll get to engage with all the other people at the summit. Today it's 6:30, and I'm talking Central European time. 4:30 Central European time for the collaborative journey. 6:30 Central European time for the Data Surveillance and Privacy Lab, where we'll be zeroing in on the subject of algorithmic justice. And you were going to join us there, weren't you?
Absolutely.
So if those are interesting subjects for you, please join us. What are your hopes in engaging with people here at the summit?
So this is why I was very excited to participate in this, because this is about how do we sort of focus on the future and do something proactively around the issues that we feel passionate about. And really it's about sort of coming together with like-minded individuals and shaping policy and actually putting pressure on governments, on organizations to actually consider some of the impacts of the decision making around data. So I'm definitely looking forward to engaging with others from different disciplines around this particular platform. I've also established a diversity and privacy platform through my work with like-minded practitioners, Abigail being one of them, where we actually want to start to elevate diverse voices around this topic also. So I just think, you know, we're in the right space, we're with the right people. What we're doing will have an impact, and we have to really believe that, and also give our time to it as well, and give our support to it, because that's how we will affect change. You know, it's through these sorts of initiatives. So I'm grateful for the platform. Thank you very much for allowing me to share a bit about my journey, and there's work to be done, and I'm very much looking forward to getting stuck in.
And we are so glad you were here. So glad here to talk to us about this really, really important area of the law where there are huge gaps, whether it comes to privacy of the privileged or even privacy of the underprivileged, or maybe even especially privacy of the underprivileged. And maybe we're all even underprivileged when it comes to our own data right now. So thank you very much for joining us in this conversation around towards data dignity and diversity, how we can design diversity into data and data protection. Thank you all. I'm sorry I filled up all the time, but I thought it was amazing. I just had so many questions to cover. You can get angry with me for that. But if you want to engage with us again, come back on stage 1 at 4:30 p.m. Central European time, where we'll dive into this specific topic and others. And you're most welcome to join us there. We have to get no, actually, we have to finish our conversation, because I know the next conversation is teed up on this stage as we speak. It's I'm just gonna. It's about. Maybe the host is here. Anya, are you here already? It's about law tunes, cartoons for the law, and how we make law visual. It's right here on this stage with Kanan Drew. So stick around for that. There you are. Look at that. And let me see if your moderator is here, or that it's up to me to weave it together. That's my work. Kanan, so nice to see you. Dyann, maybe stick around for a couple minutes.
Okay.
Kanan, very nice to meet you. I'm doing something impromptu here, but how would you help us visualize what we've been talking about here? Data privacy or privacy. And diversity. Did you already have some thoughts on that while you were listening into the final piece of this conversation?
Absolutely. This is very interesting. Thank you so much for the presentation. I loved listening to how important the question at hand is, and so much work is to be done. I'm a big believer in simplifying concepts and making it so simple that more and more people can join us in this journey. You know, often in my mind, I have this mom test going on as to how I would explain it to my mom, or, you know, somebody who does not know about this issue at all. And that, in fact, brought me to do law tunes, which I'm going to talk a little more about. But definitely kind of creating such core ideas around the big issues of privacy and diversity that you talked about, that everybody kind of feels strongly, and then more and more people feels passionately, as you know, this was discussed, that automatically more solutions and more people come into it. And then, you know, you are by design including more diversity in the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's for us normal people, sorry, Dyann, it's incredibly complicated stuff, right? It's privacy guidelines that are probably about this thick. It's that thing you click away every time you go to a website. It's algorithms that favor people that look like the people that built that typed in the algorithm, designed the algorithm. It's all this complicated stuff. Thoughts, Kanan,
Yes,
or Dyann, on how do you simplify this stuff? How do you make it accessible how do you make people care even?
Indeed, I'll just say a couple of things, and then I would love to see what Dyann also has to say. But some of the most fundamental issues, policies, and laws that affect all of us so deeply are tucked away in complicated law books and policy documents that we just cannot make head or tail out of it. And that is my, area of frustration as well. And that's how I kind of came up to the idea of law tunes, which I would love to talk about in a short while now. But indeed, as you said, there is so much behind that click that we make that is unknown and invisible, and that has to change.
Yeah.
And I think I really liked what you said about just keeping it simple. At the heart of this is the human being. It's you, it's me, it's our mothers, our brothers, our daughters, our sons. And, we care about, their information and our information. And we just need to ensure that organizations obviously act with the same level of care, because that's how we are able to then ensure our data dignity. So, I think it starts with us, and it extends into organizations and basically, jurisdictions also. So, whatever we can do to engage, to have that conversation, to drive awareness around these issues, I think that we are fulfilling our sort of obligations as data citizens to work towards data dignity.
Great.
That is
Thank
so
you.
beautifully said, Dyann. Sorry, I'm just very inspired by what you said. And I feel more and more people in the justice system, in the legal enforcement machinery, needs to think with that care and empathy so as to be able to weave that in.